Disclaimer for this video. I will be discussing elements of Persona 5, such as the story, music, and characters. If you haven't played the game, I highly suggest not watching this video right now. And given that this video has been in the works for about a couple months now, the days of recording I did have different clothes on, so anytime the wardrobe changes, that means it's a different day. Please keep that in mind. Thank you and enjoy the video. Hello and welcome to this video. You're probably wondering who I am. My name is Angel Grant, and I am not a fan of most JRPGs or RPGs in general. What is an RPG? Well, according to the most accurate source out there, Wikipedia. Wikipedia defines an RPG as a role-playing video game, which is commonly referred to as an RPG, is a video game genre where the player controls the actions of a character and or several party members immersed in a well-defined world, usually involving some form of character development by the ways of recording statistics, whether it be health, mana, all that good stuff. Let's actually step back and take a good look at the definition of role-playing game. It's quite broad. My takeaway from this is that means any game can be classified as an RPG. You hand me Final Fantasy, and I say, well, how many finals will this fantasy have? But you hand me a copy of Cars 2, and I have no questions. Given the definition is quite broad, let's try and narrow down exactly what kinds of RPG games I am not a fan of. But there are many subcategories of RPGs. We are going to rely on our friends at Wikipedia again to see these other subcategories of RPGs. These include action RPGs. These are role-playing games where combat happens in real time, as opposed to your typical turn-based or menu-based RPGs. Examples of these include The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, the Fable series, most of Kingdom Hearts, most of them, and the more recently released Final Fantasy VII Remake, which turned your average turn-based RPG and made it more accessible to people by having a streamlined action RPG combat system. Next, there is MMORPGs. MMORPGs are massively multiplayer online role-playing games, and these games have turn-based combat or either rely on action RPG elements. They can have a mix of the two. The names don't lie. These are massive, and they are filled to the brim with players, and they have a huge, expansive world. These games are either pay-to-play or free-to-play. Examples of MMORPGs include Final Fantasy Online, The Elder Scrolls Online, World of Warcraft, RuneScape, and Old School RuneScape, as a matter of fact, and even Second Life. I really don't know what Wikipedia was smoking that day. Now, there are roguelikes which I think out of everything that's listed is an outlier. But that's besides the point. Roguelikes are usually two-dimensional dungeon crawlers with elements of randomness, meaning every run of the game will be different. Roguelikes have a big emphasis on the player's character getting stronger as the more you play, thus creating a risk-reward system where when the player learns how to properly traverse the dungeon, they get rewarded with some more damage or even more health. The original roguelikes featured a text user interface to tell its story and its situations in said dungeons, but now modern roguelikes have their own gameplay features, such as permadeath being a staple. Some traditional roguelikes include Abyss's Odyssey, Sword of Fargle, Rogue, and your more modern roguelikes include Hades, Dead Cells, Slay the Spire, and the Spelunky series. Okay, this is taking way too long. The last couple of them we're going to go flying by. There are tactical RPGs. These are RPGs that incorporate strategy elements into the game, where the player controls a party and the battle happens on an isometric grid. Examples of tactical RPGs include Fire Emblem and Advanced Wars. Then there are your sandbox RPGs. These are your more open world games. These games have RPG elements such as player stats that can be raised via XP. Other RPG elements are present, such as gear and item stats, such as stronger armor and swords. Examples of sandbox RPGs include Legend of Zelda series, Xenoblade, and the Soul series. Okay, all that information is well and dandy. When I say I'm not a fan of RPGs, you can bring up the argument, well, which type of RPG am I not a fan of? And to answer that question, I would say tactical RPG or any turn-based RPGs. The only turn-based RPGs I have really played have been Final Fantasy VII and the Pokemon series. What changed? Why am I making a video about RPGs if I dislike them? Well, a couple months ago, my friend let me borrow, then keep his PS4. You know who you are, so thanks. And my older brother was always telling me to play Persona 5 Royal, because it's one of his favorite games. So he lent me his PlayStation account info, and I played Persona 5 Royal on there. And now after playing the game, I purchased a physical copy for myself, because I like having physical versions of games that I love. Now, let me tell you, this game changed my perception on what it means to be an RPG. As the title states, this game, well, it changed my heart. Now, what exactly is Persona 5 Royal? This series was completely foreign to me. The only exposure I had to it was Joker's inclusion in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The Persona series is a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei series. The first game in the Persona series was Megami Ai Banroku Persona. I probably mispronounced that. In the West, it was known as Revelations Persona. The sequel was Persona 2 Innocent Sin. These two games were on the PlayStation 1. The next two Persona games are Persona 3 and 4, both released on the PlayStation 2. Persona 5 is the sixth game in the series, and the game was first confirmed to be in development in March of 2010. Given that it took 6 years to develop, the game was going to release on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. Now, these are the mainline Persona games. There are a bunch of side games, which most of them are dancing games. Half of the side games are dancing games. There are even mobile games for the Persona franchise, but there are way too many to list, and I don't think they're that important in my opinion. There have been anime adaptations of some of the games. These are weird in my opinion because if you've played the game, you don't really need to watch these, but if you haven't, I guess it helps you introduce new people to the setting of the games. But that's just, my own opinion. There are enhanced ports of most of the mainline games. These ports / re-release usually polish up the looks to look their best and fix up some gameplay mechanics. Games like Persona 3 FES added 30 hours to the base game. Persona 4 Golden is a port that added new content and gameplay features. Now onto the game that I have played, being the enhanced port of Persona 5, that being Persona 5 Royal, which added new characters and tweaked some gameplay features. I won't go into a huge amount of detail of what is new in the game because this game is best enjoyed knowing as little as you can. And so I will be discussing why I enjoyed Persona 5 Royal so much. I feel like a quick synopsis of the game is necessary. I'll be going over huge story arcs because, again, spoilers suck. So in Persona 5, you play as a high schooler who has to balance their grades, social interactions, and even a part-time job. Look, I get it. From this little snippet, this game sounds odd. Who wants to play a game about being an everyday high schooler? But just give me a moment and I will address that in the later section of the video. The other half of the game is a dungeon-crawling, turn-based RPG. This other half of the game happens in the Metaverse. The Metaverse is essentially the collective unconscious of society. This place has people's twisted desires, and when someone has a twisted enough desire, it can take the form of a palace. And these are your main dungeons where you fight enemies called shadows. Now that we have the synopsis taken care of, we can move on to the reason why I wanted to make this video. That being how this game changed my heart. Now this game has a lot going for it, such as the visuals, music, overall story, characters, and the themes that the game discusses. I fell in love with the game as soon as I booted it up. The game bombards you with the flashy intro, and I knew from then that I was in for a wild ride. Now, I did say earlier in the video that I will be avoiding spoilers, but I feel to truly convey my feelings about the game, I have to dip into some spoilers. So this is your warning, you can skip to this portion of the video to avoid being spoiled. Okay, you've been warned. Let's get in with it. This game's overall theme is rebelling against corruption from adults, whether it be an artist who is stealing artwork from their pupils, or a mob boss who traps students into jobs that end up in them having all of their money taken from them. This theme is a beautiful one to me because the Phantom are shedding their weak selves and becoming a symbol of hope for the people. This whole idea of rebellion is shown throughout the entirety of the game. The more you play, the more characters you get added to your party, and the game does a great job of moving the story along. Of course it's not perfect. In the beginning of the game, the pacing is pretty slow, but this game has a lot to teach the player, so it's understandable. The beautiful thing about Persona 5 Royal is that everything you do in the game matters. There isn't a single thing that doesn't have an adverse effect on how you approach the dungeon crawling aspect of the game. This game at heart is split up into two sections. You spend most of your time in the real world, like I mentioned before, you're a high schooler, so you spend your time in school. You actually have to answer questions given to you by your teachers, and you have to study for exams and take those exams. Doing well in school can raise your stats like charm and knowledge, but it allows you to interact with the world more. This brings us perfectly to the confidant system. This game actually makes grinding fun. In more traditional RPGs, level grinding is terrible because it usually involves you beating filler enemies a million times. Persona 5 actually takes this system and flips it on its head by having a confidant system. While progressing the story, the player will meet new people and have new party members. You can interact with these people and form deals with them, and you hang out with them, and the more you level up their confidant ranking, you get buffs that allow you to have new abilities in the metaverse. Let's say you get close with one of your party members. You can actually get a buff that allows them to have a follow-up attack after yours. I really enjoy the confidant system because of course it allowed me to get stronger in the metaverse, but it also allowed me to learn about these characters more in this world. And let me tell you, these characters are so well written. These characters have actual motivation and backstories. They aren't just one-dimensional. I want to go back to my point where I talked about how everything in the game you do has an effect on the dungeon crawling aspect of the game. I really mean that. You can go to the gym and train, and that will increase the amount of SP you have, which allows you to use your persona's power. Oh, that reminds me. I haven't even mentioned what a persona is. A persona is a manifestation of one's rebellious soul. One awakens a persona by literally tearing away the mask that one wears. That mask represents how someone represents themselves in the real world. Now back to the main point in discussing everything you do in the game matters. Nor in this game is this idea reinforced more than in the calendar date. This game splits its days into sections. These are mornings where you mostly spend your time in school, and then there's evenings where you are out of school and you have the opportunity to hang out with your confidants, and you can go train at the gym or eat a big burger to increase your guts. But every time the game has a loading screen, there's shown a little graphic saying, take your time. This graphic in my eyes has two meanings, one being, well, yes, take your time to plan out each of your days because everything matters, but it also serves as a reminder that everything you do in the game takes up your time in the day, which is the exact opposite of the take your time line. Even the missions have a strict timeline on when they need to be completed by. This take your time serves as a cold reminder because it reminds you on how time stops for no one, no matter what you try to do. You're going to become older and people in your life will come and go. And things you do have an adverse effect in your life as a whole. You can choose to study today, but you can lose time that you could have been spending with your family or friends. The game does an excellent job in reminding you that. Now that we can move on to the other half of the game, that being the dungeon crawling RPG aspect. In a more traditional RPG, I hated to get into combat because they're usually tedious and happen every so often in the form of random encounters. In Persona 5 Royal, while invading palaces, you can basically avoid a lot of the fights by being stealthy. But in Persona 5, it has strengths going for it that actually make me want to get into battles. Starting off, when getting into battles, the game barrages you with some of the best battle themes I've ever heard. Depending on how you approach the enemy, the music changes to fit that situation. Here are some of the battle themes.
sure we got that clue. How bad this we go? Don't you know? No more art. And as you look to the horizon, not a cloud, but then stormy weather's go too cold. Seems like it crept up out of nowhere, all around you is not what you foretold. You never see it coming. You see that my mind is too fast for eyes.
The other reason why fighting in this game is actually fun is because the combat is so in-depth. There are so many ways to approach a battle. You have 3 ways to attack, those being by using your persona, which will drain your SP, or you can use melee attacks that of course don't do as much damage as compared to your persona. Finally, there's a straight up gun. The gun is great for chip damage, and then it can deal with some flying enemies. Then there are chances where when you knock down every enemy you are facing at the time, you can do an all-out attack. And these are so flashy and deal so much damage. It's always satisfying getting them as the last move, because it always ends with like a character portrait, and I think those are really great. Now, both of these parts of the games come together so beautifully. As I mentioned, everything you do in the real world affects the metaverse. It's such a beautiful song and dance. Tying all of this stuff together is amazing visuals that really immerse you into the world, and an amazing soundtrack. Every place you go has a track that matches the setting of the world. I will play some of my favorites now.
People come and they go. Some people may stay with you though. I am all alone tonight, and I kept on asking myself questions. Champagne floated, being a suicide. Keep your bumpers away from her cheating hands. Tell me that sexy. Gonna say what she's got in store for her man. So we roll the dice, see what they may fall.
I could talk about this game for hours, but in short, all of these reasons why I enjoy the game really changed my perspective on what it means to be an RPG. This game is easily up there as one of my favorite games of all time. Now I want to move into what this game has done to make me change my perspective on how I see society as a whole, since this game's whole theme is rebelling against society. This section will be mostly focused on some of the songs in the game that have made me think about society and my life as a whole. There's no better song to start off with than Beneath the Mask. The instrumental of the song plays in the beginning of the game, and the more you progress through the story, you get the vocalized version of the song. The song has the lyrics,
I'm a sharpshooter, Atlus masquerade, hiding both face and mind, all free for you to draw. I'm a sharpshooter, what else should I be? Please don't take off my mask, revealing dawn.
The song in my interpretation is how people have to put on these masks. It's similar to the idea in sociology of the power of a situation in which people act differently compared to how they would normally act when they're alone, which is normally referred to as situationism, if you want to get more professional. Thus, the idea of the mask is connected. An example of this is myself. I act differently on my Twitch streams. I act as a performer and a content creator who is a carefree guy who just plays video games. This is a stark contrast to how I present myself at school. This mask I put on is someone who's more reserved and more focused on the educational benefit rather than the social aspect of school. The next song I want to analyze shows a completely different story compared to Beneath the Mask. This song is Throw Away Your Mask. The song plays near the end of the game, but I will avoid saying where the song plays. The song has the lyrics,
Don't sleep through dreams that can't come true. No more tears shall drop from your cheeks anymore. You want me to strive for greatness. Believe in me that you don't need to suffer from anything.
While yes, this song is played near the end of the game, it ties in heavily with the story. I won't go into it a whole much because I don't want to spoil it, but I can still come to understand that this song is basically giving up your free will, and that theme is definitely enhanced with this next verse.
You don't need to make a wrong turn. It just requires guidance from above. We don't need to have this conflict. 'Cause I can take you to a place of delight. Give peace of mind to the whole world.
Essentially, this song has the idea that people allow some higher force or some higher power to essentially rid them of the mask that they use in certain situations. Thus, the name of the song, Throw Away Your Mask. Similar to real life, how people get so fed up with trying new things that they just settle, thus falling in line with everyone, and not really trying to make themselves feel unique or finding their own path. The last song I want to discuss is I Believe, which plays basically right after Throw Away Your Mask during the final arc of the game. These two songs contrast each other so much. Let's examine the lyrics.
I used to have that feeling, premonition of falling short. Now I have no fear, sees me to fight it together. I believe we can fly up in the sky. One day we may just be able to touch down on the star of the road we have to go. The rolling path we shall proceed until the end of our roads. There's no turning back for us, 'cause we will never give up.
Given that this music is basically played right after Throw Away Your Mask, it's easy to see the connection in how these songs are polar opposite of each other's. Where one, it's about giving up your free will and allowing some higher power to control your fate. This one is about believing in oneself and others to make their own paths. Essentially a rebirth of spirit, if you will. This is connected with society and how there are still people who try to find their own ways in life, whether it be just trying a whole bunch of new stuff to seeing what sticks, or just expressing themselves in different ways. This game's music and themes have had such a profound impact on me. I beat the game on March 23rd of 2021, and I've been working on this script and video basically since I started playing the game. I knew that this game was going to change something inside of me. That's why I wanted to make this video. While playing the game, I was note-taking, saying, well, I really like this character and I really like this story arc. Once I beat the game, I experienced what some in the Persona fanbase called post-Persona depression. This is basically depression one enters after you realize that you spent close to 100 hours on the game, and you went through a roller coaster of emotions, and you realize it's over. I couldn't really play any other game, and I really just wanted to sleep. Everything I've discussed up until this point have been my personal opinions on the game. I really love this game, and I hope it shows. This game has successfully changed my heart, and I couldn't be more grateful.
Hey all, this is Editor Angel. I hope you enjoyed the video. I poured my heart and soul into it, and I spent months on it, and I hope the wait was worth it. If you like hearing me speak or my comedy, I stream daily on my Twitch channel, usually on weekdays at 8 PM Central Time. I want to thank everyone who helped me with the project, and I will have an end screen providing my citations in APA 7th edition.